It was a crisp June morning in St. Mary Mead, the kind of day when the sun lazily stretched across the countryside, and the scent of roses filled the air like a silent hymn to summer. Miss Jane Marple, with her ever watchful eyes and teacup in hand, sat by her parlor window overlooking the vicarage garden. This particular day, she was invited to the annual garden party hosted by the enigmatic Lady Felicity Burnham, a recent arrival in the village whose grand manner and glamorous past were already the subject of considerable gossip. By 3 o'clock, the Burnham garden was alive with villagers sipping elderflower cordial and nibbling on scones. Miss Marple observed quietly from under a wide-brimmed hat, and that's when she saw it. A mirror, old and ornate, had been propped against the ivy-covered wall as a decoration. Guests laughed and chatted around it, not noticing what Miss Marple saw, a reflection that didn't match reality. The young maid, Alice, stood adjusting the trays of sandwiches. In the mirror, she was smiling, an odd, too wide smile, but in real life, her expression was tense, even fearful. Within the hour, Alice was gone, disappeared, vanished as if the garden had swallowed her whole. And Miss Marple knew, the mirror had lied. Or worse, it had told the truth no one else could see. The garden party carried on, oblivious to the absence of one small maid. Laughter danced in the air, glasses clinked, and cucumber sandwiches disappeared as if no one noticed a thing had gone amiss. But Miss Marple had seen the girl, Alice, clearly. She had seen the shadow behind her eyes. And she had seen the smile in the mirror that did not belong to any innocent soul. Miss Marple moved quietly toward the mirror once more, her steps slow and deliberate. She studied its gilded frame, now slightly tilted in the breeze. It was not merely decorative. It was old, far older than Lady Felicity's taste would normally suggest. The carvings, delicate as they were, hinted at something more gothic. And yet, the mirror's surface was clean, spotless, and far too polished. "Curious piece, isn't it?" said Lady Felicity suddenly, appearing beside Miss Marple as if conjured by the thought. "Indeed," said Miss Marple, without looking away. "It must have a story." Felicity gave a laugh that seemed rehearsed. "Oh, I picked it up from an antique dealer in Gloucestershire. Simply couldn't resist it, adds a little drama to the garden." Miss Marple smiled politely. "Drama indeed, though I wonder if some things are best left indoors." Lady Felicity's lips twitched. "I find mirrors useful, Miss Marple. They tell us who we are. Or," Miss Marple replied gently, "who we pretend to be." The hostess stiffened. "Excuse me, I must check on the champagne." And with that, Lady Felicity glided away, her pale green dress rustling like leaves in wind. Miss Marple watched her go, then turned her attention back to the party. She scanned for Alice, but the girl was gone. Nowhere among the hedges, nor near the tables. She approached one of the footmen, an older man named Grant whom she recognized from previous events. "Excuse me, Grant," she said kindly. "The maid, Alice, I believe she was serving earlier. I haven't seen her for some time." The man blinked. "Alice, she was here not 20 minutes ago. But you're right, I haven't seen her since. Might have gone back inside, I suppose. May I ask you to check?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, Miss Marple." As Grant hurried toward the manor house, Miss Marple moved back to her seat and sipped her lukewarm tea. She stared at the mirror once more. And the reflection changed. Not dramatically, not like in a horror film, but subtly. In the corner of the glass, behind the shrubs, a figure appeared. A silhouette, a woman standing completely still, only she wasn't there in real life. Only in the mirror. Miss Marple blinked, looked behind her, nothing. Then a scream echoed from inside the house. Grant came stumbling out, white-faced. "She's gone, Miss Marple. Alice, she's not in the house. No one's seen her, and there's blood on the back stairs." The garden fell silent. The mirror glimmered in the sunlight. And Miss Marple, her eyes narrowing, knew she was already deep in something dangerous. Absolutely. Here's the continuation with Chapter 3 of Miss Marple and the Smile Behind the Mirror, Blood on the Back Stairs. The mood at the garden party had shifted in an instant. The cheer was gone, replaced with an anxious stillness. Conversations ceased. The musicians stopped playing mid-tune. All eyes turned toward the manor as the word, blood, spread like wildfire. Lady Felicity reappeared at the threshold of the house, her face drawn tight. "Everyone, please remain calm. There's been a minor incident. I assure you it's nothing serious." Miss Marple stood, adjusting her shawl. "Perhaps, Lady Felicity, I could take a look." I am rather experienced with minor incidents. Lady Felicity hesitated for a beat too long. Then she gave a brittle smile. Of course, Miss Marple. Follow me. The two women entered the house, followed by a few of the more curious guests, though Felicity quickly stopped them at the drawing room with drinks and reassurances. Miss Marple and Felicity continued alone down a dim corridor, the sounds of the party fading behind them. They reached the back staircase, a narrow passage rarely used by guests. The wooden steps creaked underfoot. Halfway up, Miss Marple saw it, a dark smear along the wall, and droplets leading upward. Blood, Miss Marple murmured, crouching with difficulty to inspect the trail. Fresh, not a nosebleed, I'd wager. Felicity paled slightly. I don't understand. Why would she be here? This stairway leads to the guest wing. Indeed, said Miss Marple, rising slowly. But not many guests would use this path. It's out of sight, quite ideal, in fact, for someone not wanting to be seen. Are you implying something, Miss Marple? I'm merely observing and wondering, what might have frightened that poor girl. They reached the top of the stairs. A hallway stretched ahead, most of the doors were closed, save one at the far end, ajar, as if someone had left it in haste. Miss Marple moved toward it, ignoring Felicity's soft protests. Inside, the room was lavish, but cold. Heavy velvet curtains blocked the light. The bed was perfectly made. A writing desk sat by the window, scattered with papers. And on the floor, beside the desk, lay a silver hairpin, and a torn fragment of cloth. Miss Marple picked up the cloth. It was part of a uniform. A maid's uniform. This was Alice's, she whispered. Then, from behind them, a door creaked. Both women turned. Nothing there. Only the long, dark hallway stretching behind them. Miss Marple took a step forward, glancing once again at the mirror she had passed earlier, an old, full-length standing glass in the corner. And once more, the mirror didn't match the room. In the reflection, the hallway was darker. The velvet curtains were gone. And on the bed lay a figure. Still, pale, eyes wide open. But when Miss Marple turned to look directly at the bed, there was nothing there. She looked back at the mirror. The bed was empty again. Felicity saw her face pale. What is it? What did you see? Miss Marple didn't answer. Not yet. She needed time to think. She needed to speak with the staff. To find out more about Alice. About this house. And most of all, about that mirror. Because whatever had happened, here, Miss Marple was certain of one thing. The mirror was not simply showing reflections. It was revealing the truth. And the truth was something someone was desperate to hide. Here's the continuation with Chapter 4 of Miss Marple and the Smile Behind the Mirror. Miss Marple returned to the ground floor with Lady Felicity trailing behind her, now visibly agitated. The guests were still lingering in the garden, but the laughter had dulled. The mirror in the ivy corner remained untouched, casting soft reflections that Miss Marple no longer trusted. I shall speak with your staff, she told Lady Felicity firmly. Quietly, discreetly. Felicity's response was hesitant. If you must, though I can't imagine what more they might say. But Miss Marple was already heading for the servants' quarters. In the kitchen, the housekeeper, Mrs. Braithwaite, was bustling nervously, wiping the same dish for the third time. She was a stout woman with hard eyes and a thin mouth that seldom smiled. Miss Marple greeted her gently. I do hope I'm not disturbing you, Mrs. Braithwaite. The housekeeper didn't stop rubbing the dish. You're never a bother, Miss Marple. Though we're all in a state, as you can imagine. Indeed, a terrible business. I was hoping you might tell me a bit about Alice. Quiet girl, wasn't she? Mrs. Braithwaite finally set the dish down. Too quiet, if you ask me. Kept to herself, always staring at that wretched mirror Lady Felicity brought into the garden. The mirror. Miss Marple leaned forward. Did she say anything about it? The housekeeper hesitated, then lowered her voice. Said she saw her mother in it. Her mother. She died 2 years ago. Consumption. Poor soul. Alice was just 16 when it happened. And she saw her mother in the mirror, alive. Mrs. Braithwaite nodded slowly. Said the mirror spoke to her sometimes. Whispered things. We all thought it was grief or nonsense. But, last week she started acting strange. How so? Jumping at shadows. Screaming in her sleep. And twice, Miss Marple, she said something was following her. Miss Marple's lips pressed into a line. Did she ever mention seeing herself smiling? The housekeeper froze. Yes, she did. She said she smiled in the mirror when she didn't mean to. As if someone else was using her face. For a moment, silence fell between them, heavy as stone. Then a knock sounded at the kitchen door. Mrs. Braithwaite opened it. A young footman stood there, looking pale. "We've found something in the cellar." Miss Marple's heart quickened. "Take me there." They descended into the depths of the manor, the air growing colder with each step. The cellar was dim and filled with crates of dusty wine bottles. But near the far wall, someone had pulled aside a stack of old paintings and discovered a narrow wooden door, hidden behind them. Locked. The footman pointed to the ground. "That's not paint, miss. That's blood." Miss Marple stooped and touched the floor. Still damp, she looked at the door, then at the rusted keyhole. "We need that opened." The footman shook his head. "Only Lady Felicity has the key to that part of the cellar. Says it's a private collection." Miss Marple rose, her eyes dark with suspicion. "Then it's time we ask Lady Felicity what exactly she's been collecting." Because Miss Marple had a creeping feeling in her bones, a whisper of danger from long ago. And if she was right, Alice wasn't just missing. She'd been taken by something, or someone, that had been hiding in this house far longer than anyone realized. Lady Felicity was in her drawing room again, pouring herself a brandy this time. Her hands trembled ever so slightly, barely enough to notice, but Miss Marple noticed everything. "I understand," Miss Marple said calmly, "that the lower cellar is locked." Lady Felicity paused, glass halfway to her lips. "Yes, for good reason. There are valuable antiques stored down there. Some quite fragile." Miss Marple met her eyes. "Is Alice fragile?" Felicity blinked. "Pardon. There's blood on the floor outside the door. Blood that leads from a frightened girl's last known path." Felicity's mouth tightened. "Miss Marple, this is absurd." And yet, Miss Marple continued, unshaken, absurdity has a curious way of dancing with truth. "May I have the key?" Felicity hesitated, then crossed to a writing desk. She unlocked a drawer and removed a small, iron key, rusted, with a rose-shaped handle. She handed it over without a word. Moments later, Miss Marple was back in the cellar. She inserted the key. The lock clicked with a reluctant groan. The door opened. A rush of cold air escaped. Inside was a narrow corridor lined with old furniture under white sheets. At the far end stood a pedestal, and on it, another mirror. But this one was different. It was taller, older, with strange symbols carved into the wooden frame. Unlike the one in the garden, it wasn't polished. It was clouded, as if it held fog inside. Miss Marple stepped closer, her cane tapping on the stone floor. A soft noise stopped her. A whisper, faint, like wind through dry leaves. She leaned in. The fog in the mirror swirled, and for a split second, Miss Marple saw something. Alice, standing behind her, smiling, but not with her own smile. It was wrong, too wide, too knowing. Her eyes were blank. Miss Marple turned around quickly. The cellar was empty. She faced the mirror again. The fog had cleared. Only her own reflection stared back now, small, aged, and very much alone. Something moved in the shadows near the pedestal. A figure, brief, hunched, and gone in a blink. Miss Marple's heart thumped. "Show yourself," she said quietly. The silence returned. Then, a faint sound, scratching, like fingernails on wood, came from behind one of the draped furniture pieces. She approached it and lifted the sheet. A trunk, large, padlocked. Miss Marple knelt slowly, inspecting the edges. Scratches, dried blood near the clasp. She needed help opening it. She turned and hurried from the cellar. As she emerged into the daylight, she found the housemaid Elsie nervously loitering in the hallway. "Fetch Inspector Cray," Miss Marple instructed. "Tell him to come at once. And bring someone who can break a lock." Elsie nodded and ran. Miss Marple returned to the drawing room. Lady Felicity was gone. On the table sat her half-drunk brandy. And a note, written in a trembling hand. "Greater than, some mirrors do not reflect. They remember, and some memories, should stay buried." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. This mystery was no longer just about a missing maid. This was about a house with secrets. And a mirror that smiled back with a stranger's face. By the time Inspector Cray arrived, the mood inside the manor had shifted from concern to dread. The guests had been sent home quietly. The sun was sinking, casting long shadows across the garden, and the mirror among the ivy stood blank, waiting. Miss Marple led the inspector to the cellar without delay. He was a tall, weathered man with a quiet respect for Miss Marple's instincts. He didn't ask questions, he followed her to the locked trunk without hesitation. A constable pried open the heavy padlock with a crowbar. The lid creaked as it opened. Inside lay a bundle of linen sheets. And beneath them, Alice. Curled into a fetal position. Pale, unmoving, but alive, barely. She's breathing, the constable said. Stunned, Miss Marple dropped to her knees. Alice's eyes fluttered open, glassy and distant. She's been drugged, Miss Marple whispered. Kept here, hidden. Inspector Cray looked grim. Why, who would do this to a maid? Miss Marple looked toward the second mirror still standing ominously on the pedestal. Not just a maid, a witness, someone who saw too much. She saw something in the mirror. Cray asked. No, Miss Marple replied softly. She saw through it. They carried Alice upstairs and called a doctor. But Miss Marple stayed behind, staring into the second mirror's ghostly fog. She touched its surface, cold, but not lifeless. From behind her, a voice came. I didn't mean to hurt her. Lady Felicity. She stood at the top of the cellar stairs, pale as bone, her eyes hollow. She went looking for it, Felicity said. The mirror. She said it whispered to her. And what did it whisper to you? Miss Marple asked. Felicity didn't answer. Instead, she descended slowly. I bought that mirror in a village in northern Italy. The man warned me, said it had belonged to a family that went mad. Said they believed the mirror didn't reflect, but absorbed. Absorbed. Memories. Sins. Secrets. It showed not what you wanted to see, but what you tried to hide. Miss Marple nodded. And what did you try to hide? Lady Felicity trembled. My sister, Evelyn. A silence fell, deep and cold. She died in this house, Felicity said. Years ago. She was unstable, violent. I locked her in the cellar during one of her episodes. I meant to let her out once she calmed down. But she never did. She looked at the mirror. And now she lives in there. Miss Marple said nothing. She simply walked over to the mirror and pulled a cloth from a chair, then covered the glass entirely. Lady Felicity sank to the ground and wept, not just for her sins, but for the years she'd spent watching her reflection, haunted by the sister whose smile no longer belonged to her. Alice recovered slowly. The mirror in the garden was removed and later found shattered in the tool shed, though no one confessed to breaking it. The other mirror, the one in the cellar, was taken away by the authorities, never seen again. But Miss Marple, as she sat in her quiet cottage weeks later, sipping her tea, kept thinking about what she saw in that glass. The unnatural smile, the empty eyes, the subtle movement of a figure who shouldn't have been there. Some mirrors, she thought, aren't made of silver and glass. They're made of memory, of guilt, and sometimes, they smile. A month had passed since the incident at Hawthorne Manor. Alice had left the house and was now living quietly with an aunt in Cornwall. She spoke little, and when she did, her words were soft, uncertain, as if she feared her voice might carry into the wrong ears. The doctor said she'd recover, eventually. But Miss Marple had her doubts. Some wounds, she knew, were not visible on the body. As for Lady Felicity, she had quietly stepped down from her many social obligations and rarely left the manor. Some said she had gone mad. Others whispered of guilt, curses, or ghosts. But Miss Marple, seated near her fireplace with a cup of chamomile tea and a cat purring in her lap, wasn't interested in gossip. She was thinking about the smile. The one she saw in the mirror. That same smile had haunted Alice. It hadn't belonged to her, or anyone living. It had been worn like a mask. A smile that didn't move the eyes. A smile that didn't end. One evening, a package arrived at Miss Marple's door. No return address. Just a brown box, sealed with wax. Inside, a hand mirror. Silver-backed, worn, and deeply familiar. Miss Marple set it on the table and stared at it for a long while. It had no reflection. She picked it up slowly. And saw, not herself, but a corridor, dimly lit, velvet curtains, a bed at the end, and someone lying in it. Someone smiling. She lowered the mirror quickly and took a long, steady breath. Then, without a word, she stood, walked outside into her garden, and dug a hole beneath the rosebush. The mirror went in, wrapped in linen, buried deep in the cold earth. She pressed the soil down firmly and planted a fresh rose on top. When she returned to her cottage, she didn't look in any mirrors for a week. And from that night forward, whenever she saw a reflection, anywhere, she paused, just for a second, to be sure that the face looking back was still hers. Because some smiles don't fade. And some reflections are never yours to begin with.